Are you ready to listen to this chilling horror story set in an old log house in the deep woods of America? After years of estrangement from her family, Lucia learns that her parents were brutally murdered by a killer. In the haunted house she inherited, she is forced to confront the paranormal and dark spirits. In this horror story, you will feel the terror of Lucia as she struggles to survive in a house filled with mysterious shadows, terrifying whispers, and ghosts of the past. If you are interested in horror stories, paranormal phenomena, and spooky house legends, this video is for you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss new horror stories. Salem Woods was famous for the horrible stories that the townspeople had told over the years. In the heart of the forest stood an old abandoned wooden house with rotting boards, mossy stone walls, and faded red paint. It was where Lucia's childhood nightmares began. Lucia had built a new life in the city, trying to escape her dark past. But the brutal murder of her family and the inheritance of this house forced her to confront her past. Lucia got into her car and set off towards her past. As she drove through the forest, the shadows of the trees lengthened, and the howling of the wind sounded like dark whispers. When she reached the door of the house, she stepped onto the old wooden staircase. The staircase creaked, and she went to the door. When Lucia turned the knob of the rusty door, the stale, musty smell from inside filled her lungs. As she stepped inside, she was greeted by dusty furniture, faded family photos on the wall, and curtains lovingly sewn by her mother. As Lucia walked through the rooms, memories flooded her mind. The rocking chair in the corner of the kitchen was where her mother used to read in the evenings. It was empty now, but she noticed that the chair rocked slightly on its own. Was it the wind or something moving it? Lucia decided to stay in her old childhood room. In the middle of the night, she was awakened by light rattling coming from the attic. It was exactly 3:33 a.m. This hour, often mentioned in horror stories, was the time when the spirit world was most active. Gathering her courage, Lucia stepped out into the hallway. In the flickering candlelight, something seemed to be moving in the walls. As she made her way to her mother's old sewing room, she saw a pale face in the mirror. It was her mother's face. Lucia stepped back, screaming, but the face in the mirror disappeared instantly. The next morning, Lucia decided to go down to the basement. As she descended the musty stairs, the boards creaked softly under her feet. In the darkness, she found an old chest. Inside was a blood-stained diary written by her mother. "There is something in this house. It is watching us. It whispers through the walls. It has taken over our souls. We cannot escape." As Lucia read these lines, she was startled by the sound of deep breathing coming from the corner of the basement. In the dim light, a tall, rotten figure was approaching her, gliding through the darkness. Lucia jumped up in panic and tried to close the door, but it locked itself. Lucia was trapped inside the house. The muffled whispers through the walls, the shadows on the ceiling, and the faces in the mirrors became more and more intense. She realized that all this was the result of an evil ritual performed here by the murderer who had killed her family. In the attic, hidden between old boards, he found a ritual space. Black candles, symbols drawn in blood, ancient Latin inscriptions carved into the floor. These ensured that the evil presence in the house was trapped in this world. To break the ritual, Lucia began to recite the Latin words she found in an old book of prayers. But as she recited the prayer, the house began to shake. Windows opened and closed on their own. Screams came from the walls. The dark spirit suddenly appeared in the attic and floated towards Lucia. She tried to escape, but the doors of the house were sealed and the windows closed. Just then, her mother's spirit appeared in a corner and whispered sadly, I cannot protect you, Lucia. He has chosen you now." Lucia looked into the being's eyes, her eyes filled with fear. The darkness slowly enveloped her. Her screams echoed off the walls of the house, and silence fell. Days passed. Lucia's boyfriend, Ethan, was deeply troubled when he hadn't heard from his girlfriend in days. He knew she had gone to her old family home in Salem Forest, but when Lucia never returned, Ethan was galvanized into action. As Ethan drove along the dirt roads of the town, the gloomy atmosphere immediately caught his attention. The old wooden houses were crumbling with the weariness of time. When an old woman sitting on the street saw Ethan, she shook her head from side to side and whispered, "The house swallows souls. Even if you find it, there is no way out." Ethan recognized the fear in the villager's eyes. Another man took Ethan's arm and said, "That forest, there is a dark curse there. Years ago, a devil ritual was performed in that house. No one who left ever came back." Ignoring the warnings, Ethan got into his car and drove to Salem Woods. The further into the woods they went, the denser and darker the trees became. Lucia's car stopped in front of a rotten wooden house. The windows were broken, and the walls were covered in moss. When Ethan pushed the door open, he was greeted by a heavy, musty smell and an atmosphere where time stood still. In the living room, Lucia's childhood photos still hung on the wall, but the faces had faded and the eyes were blank. Suddenly, a whisper was heard. "Save us, Ethan." Ethan turned around in fear, but no one was there. Ethan looked all over the house, but he couldn't find Lucia. Now there was only one place left to go, the basement. Ethan thought he might find Lucia in the basement. As he descended the stairs, scratching sounds came from the walls. When he reached the basement, he was greeted by an old chest, ritual symbols surrounded by candles and blood-stained boards. In the darkness, he saw Lucia, slumped on the ground as if chained. On her pale, thin face, her eyes glowed with fear. "Ethan, you must run. He will take everyone who belongs here," Lucia whispered. As Ethan moved towards Lucia, a figure emerged from the darkness. A tall, rotting body stared at them with empty eyes. Ethan grabbed Lucia by the arms and tried to pull her away, but Lucia's body seemed to vanish into thin air. Suddenly, the house began to shake. Muffled screams rose from the attic, and blood began to drip from the walls. As Ethan tried to save Lucia, the dark spirit quickly approached Ethan. He ran towards the door, but it was already sealed. The dark spirit floated into Ethan's body and engulfed him like Lucia. Ethan's eyes turned black in an instant. The next morning, the town elders knew that the terrible screams from the forest must have come from the house, but none of them dared to go there. The cursed house in Salem Forest had trapped another spirit. The spirits of Lucia and Ethan would remain within its walls forever. A new name appeared on the porch of the house, carved in wood: Ethan Harper. And the whispers from the depths of the forest continued to echo night after night. "Save us,